is because I have found online there's like two extremes. There's like, if your relationship is hard in any way, then you're with the wrong person or you're doing it wrong. And then on the other camp, you have like, marriage is a huge process of sanctification. It is so difficult, just an emphasis on the hard moments. And when we talk about emotional control from femininity, it's not about suppressing your emotions. It's about feeling them, but also knowing and being an adult about what you need to do throughout your day, not to take it out on other people. Imagine if you are in a friendship with somebody and like they have a backup friend to you. I know like the traditional femininity space gets knocked down and insulted and basically just says that we're a recipe for abuse, but the princess as if he is a knight, that kind of concept. So my husband and I are celebrating 9 years married at the end of August, and in honor of that, I thought that I would compile a list, like also with his help, by the way, of what I like to call actual helpful marriage advice. Now, as many of you know, relationships is kind of a touchy subject, and I feel as though every relationship is different, although there can be foundations of femininity, masculinity, harmony, all that kind of stuff. The dynamics of a relationship within that structure can vary. And for that reason, I haven't really been that vocal on the topic of relationships on this channel, or I've like flip-flopped, I've posted some videos, I've privated some videos, just because of the nuance of this. Every time I post something about men and relationships, I always get comments that something is different in like their case, or whatever along those lines. And that is totally valid. So I do have to put a disclaimer that some of this advice I'm going to talk about on my channel here might not be for your marriage, but in honor of my husband and I having 9 years of wisdom of marriage so far, I am going to share with you some advice that we learned along the way, that we received, that we discovered ourselves, that actually helped our relationship. And a reason why I'm calling it like actually helpful marriage advice is because I have found online there's like two extremes. There's like, if your relationship is hard in any way, then you're with the wrong person or you're doing it wrong. And then on the other camp, you have like, marriage is a huge process of sanctification. It is so difficult, just an emphasis on the hard moments. And as many of you know, on this channel, we are all about balance. So for that reason, I do believe that a successful relationship with the traditional masculine, traditional feminine meets somewhere in the middle. Before I get into the video, I do want to thank all of my members who support the message of my channel, those of you who like the videos, and of course, I always welcome comments down below. It helps the videos get pushed out into the algorithm, which helps the right people find the videos that I make on this channel. So let's get right into some of the tips that we compiled together. The first one is the 48-hour conflict rule, which I have mentioned on my member side and in a recent video on the public side, but it's essentially a method that works for us that prevents resentment from building up. So if you have a conflict or you have a dispute, what we have found works is 48 hours. So the first 24 hours, we give each other grace on like whatever might have been said in that dispute out of emotion. And we also give each other space to calm down. And then the next 24 hours, we each reflect on like our side of the argument or our opinion or what happened from a more neutral perspective. And we find that 48 hours allows us to approach the topic of conversation from a better level head without emotion. And we're able to apologize perhaps for what we might have said to the other person that could have hurt them. Which ties into my second point, which is knowing your style of conflict. This alludes back to what I said at the beginning of the video, where there's this advice online that says like, if you're fighting in your relationship or you have arguments or disagreements, you are married to the wrong person. And I don't agree with that. I instead believe that you have to know your actual conflict style. You might not be the type of person that has conflict in your life, and that is because you might have an avoidant attachment, or you might be somebody that becomes very defensive. The Gottman Institute, I believe that's what it's called, has put out resources. I'll try to find it and link it down below on knowing what your conflict style is. But once my husband and I were able to address like the type of style of conflict that we engage in, which has extended to like our entire lives, we are better able to focus on like the advice that deals with our type of personalities. So like, are you avoidant? Are you explosive? Are you analytical? Are you emotional? You really need to unpack this in yourself, which is going to benefit you in, again, all of the relationships in your life. This will also give you a better understanding of like what you may have learned in childhood. For me, both of my parents were avoidant in conflict. And on my husband's side, they were very vocal. So I was never really exposed to any type of disagreement because my parents had an avoidant conflict style. And that's not like to knock my parents. You know, they had an amazing marriage, and my husband and I, we have an amazing marriage as well, but we are our own individual people. So we kind of had to learn our conflict style together and unpack what we had been taught or what we hadn't been taught growing up. The third point is more of a traditional femininity, masculinity advice, which is let him lead, even in the small things where you think that he might be wrong. Now, I know a lot of people are going to jump at this and be like, what do you mean let him lead? Like, what if he's making a huge mistake? The author Laura Doyle talks about this in her work, and she does a way better job at explaining it. But in a modern sense, in a transactional relationship, we kind of don't give people grace, and we don't understand that they are also developing in their masculinity and their femininity as they go through life. So stepping into letting your husband lead can extend to all the small things. Now, just a reminder for those of you who are reluctant to what I'm saying here, doesn't mean that you follow into immoral things. That is not what I'm talking about here. But like I mentioned, the author who explains it much better than I can, I will link her work down below. Communicate in your off days. I talked about this in feminine communication and sprinkled it throughout other feminine videos that I have made. Do this with your coworkers, your friends, your family, and especially your husband. If you're having an off day, for example, before your period, for me, my moods are a little bit erratic around that time. So I let my husband know, like, I'm not having a good day. I'm going to try to get out of this mood, but I'm not having a good day. I apologize in advance if I seem distracted, if I seem in a bad mood. I'm just like going through it right now. Men who are in their healthy masculine, they want to see you happy. It deeply affects them when you are not happy. But women, I mentioned countless times on my channel, we feel all of our emotions deeply, and that is so healthy for us. But that means that there is going to be times or days where we just need to wallow the entire day. We need to process those emotions. We need to process that hard time. The atmosphere of your home is deeply affected by your mood, but in order to process it, move forward in a like healthier, lighter, more carefree feminine, you do need to have that time to internalize those emotions. So just giving your family a heads up, giving your husband a heads up, and even putting personal boundaries, like just like toning down your communication for that day, or like doing activities that are low energy with your kids just to prevent yourself from snapping. The part of emotional control that isn't taught in modern society, and when we talk about emotional control from femininity, it's not about suppressing your emotions. It's about feeling them, but also knowing and being an adult about what you need to do throughout your day, not to take it out on other people. Number 5, it's important when you are perhaps in conflict or disagreement to make sure that you're both not criticizing character, but you're talking about action specifically. For example, talking about the action of something that you think is lazy is totally different than blowing up and calling your husband lazy or your wife lazy. Like, that's just a generic example. Same with like perhaps if he was forgetful about something that was very important to you. Labeling him or like him labeling you as thoughtless is totally different than focusing on perhaps the individual action and actually getting to the root of that action. When you take a step back and you analyze like the situation, the action, whatever happened, and you just assume the best of your spouse, you aren't going to harbor resentment. And resentment over the small things, over the big things, is a marriage killer. Side note, if you hear my kids in the background, they are playing pretty loudly. I apologize for that. The next thing I want to talk about is number 6, which is voice your needs, especially your intimacy needs, and also just like anything that has to do with your love language, for example. Let your spouse, let your husband know what you want, what you need, what you would like to buy, what you would like to do. He might not be able to give all those things for you, but trust me, a man in his healthy masculine, which I'm assuming we've all attracted through our femininity work, does want to make you happy, does want to satisfy you, does want to give you your heart's desire. But again, remember, it's not transactional. You voice your needs and you let it go. You assume the best of him, and trust me, your man will make it happen. He wants you to be engaged. He wants you to be joyful, but you also have to trust him. And likewise, when we're talking about intimacy, if you are having a problem with intimacy as a woman, I disagree about like looking at intimacy like a dutiful thing. Intimacy is a beautiful and relationship life-giving act. And a lot of the advice out there kind of like reduces men to animals. This is a mutual thing where both of you are supposed to feel excited, not like a checklist, not like a like do this intimacy every day and then like the marriage problems will solve themselves. Both of you being connected, excited. I can't really elaborate so much on this because I don't want my video to get partially demonetized, but I hope you understand what I mean with this point. Your husband is a masculine man and a woman in her healthy feminine are both excited to spend time together, and they voice their needs on what they need, and they listen to each other on what they need to be able to be excited together. It's also important to remember that you're on the same team. A lot of modern advice is like having your foot out of the relationship. Imagine if you are in a friendship with somebody and like they have a backup friend to you. That is actually something that does happen, and it's probably happened to you in high school. Now imagine if you take that same mentality, that whole, I talked about in another video that I'm going to post, or I have already posted, like decentering men in the negative way, like viewing your marriage as an extremely oppressive state, which again shouldn't be the case if you are voicing your needs and you are in your healthy feminine. But like that doesn't feel good. And yes, there are risks, and yes, it is a little bit unsafe and vulnerable, but it is what yields fruit. Remember that in marriage, and I have seen this, so I can vouch for it, like you are going to be holding this person's hand when you or him depart this earth. That is very serious, but also extremely beautiful. And I know like the traditional femininity space gets knocked down and insulted and basically just says that we're a recipe for abuse. But I do want to put a little bit of a point out there saying that like advocating for women in their soft feminine in a society that appreciates this is supposed to be a safeguard for life's difficulties. And yes, it's not a guarantee. Tragedy can happen, and infidelity, things like that can happen. But this space is all about creating a culture who values femininity and also supports her if those tragedies happen to her. So although that was a little bit of a tangent, I do want you to remember that this relationship, I don't want you to go into marriage with all of these fears that are put on you by society. There are women, myself, friends online in this community even, that have amazing husbands, life-giving relationships where they work together through conflict, like I mentioned in the first point and in the second point, where you better each other and you have that person that you get to go through life with. I feel like as a society, we have just so transactionalized relationships that we forgot about the beauty of creating a life with somebody. So all that being said, just remember that you are on the same team. You are one. Number 9 is a little bit of like an easy point that I have talked about a long time ago in the inception of my channel, which is a way that you can serve your spouse, is prioritizing what matters to him in the home. A lot of people, again, in modern society think that if you are acting in your traditional feminine in a relationship and you have the desire to quote unquote serve your spouse, that you are a slave, that you are doing every single thing. Your husband, again, wants you to be happy, whole, rested, excited to be around him. And so I want to encourage you not to do everything, but to ask him, what are the most important things that you value in our home? There was this TikTok about like kind of along the lines, I'll try to post here, about babe, like don't worry about dinner, just throw a pizza in the oven, a frozen pizza in the oven. And there were some women who said like, say less, I will put it in the oven. And other women that said, nah, that's not my style. And they proceeded to film themselves cooking. Both of these women are right. And that is just by knowing your husband. If your husband values an elaborately cooked meal and focusing on those things, and like he probably doesn't care about, for example, the floors being completely clean all the time, like give yourself grace in other departments. Now, I have always said that I try to do it all because I like homemaking, I like cleaning, I like cooking. Those are things that I enjoy, and I also love like cleaning for myself. But my husband, when I asked him, he was like, I just want like my meals ready at certain times and laundry done often. but he doesn't care about the rest. And I guarantee you that your man has things that he doesn't care about as much. And although you might want to do it all, just know one way that you can bless him and serve him is in the healthiest way, by also respecting yourself but pouring back into the relationship. Because like, and for people who are gawking, there are of course so many ways that your husband serves you as well. It's just a word. Don't get triggered by it. That's why I keep saying it, so that you're not getting triggered, so you deprogram yourself. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Just don't put so much pressure on yourself. Your husband would rather have a healthy, happy, excited again wife than somebody who burns herself out by doing everything that is unrealistic. The 10th thing is being selective about, like problems or things that you share in the marriage. Now, I know some people at first glance are going to say, like, you should be able to tell your husband everything. And that is true. My husband knows everything about me. But there's a difference between like constantly offloading your problems or like things that are difficult or like ranting about your kid's bad day and just like, again, offloading it on him. Because men, especially masculine men, they want to make you happy. So if you're constantly talking problems, it's going to put a little bit more extra stress. And what I'm trying to say here, it's difficult to explain, but like for you, talking about it as women, like it's healthy for us to vent. I talked about this in my motherhood video. But for men, they just go automatically in problem solving mode. So I'm not saying don't share things with your husband. I'm just saying be mindful of the fact that he is going to want to solve your problem right away. And there are things that he perhaps cannot solve, or you just want to talk about them. Preface that you just want to like vent and you don't need problems to be solved, and maybe also select the right time to do it, which is just something to be mindful of. My husband in his career had for a long time been like in constant problem solving mode. That was quite literally his job, was to solve problems and like complex problems. So I wanted to tell him all these things, and I didn't stop myself from telling him these things and sharing my life and sharing my difficulties, but I was mindful of when I did it. I wasn't just constantly texting him throughout the day about all of my problems. I was perhaps doing that when my mother was alive to her, or like a friend. And then later I would like summarize my day and talk to him about it after perhaps like he watched his favorite show or something. Every husband is going to be different. Maybe yours does enjoy those texts throughout the day. Like there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just being more mindful of how the feminine brain operates and how the masculine one does. And lastly, a very triggering one, but it's be happy with what he provides. And I got this also from an older femininity creator. And I love learning from older women. And when I say this, so many people will be like, what do you mean? It is just the practice of being happier, the practice of authentic gratitude. Gratitude and authentic gratitude inspires a man to do more, to be more in his healthy masculine, to develop more, to go on that quest for the princess as if he is a knight, that kind of concept. And that is done through gratitude. And the modern advice out there thinks that when we are saying this, we're talking about accepting breadcrumbs, about not having standards, about putting, our standards low. My husband has always been chivalrous, even when we started dating, like over the top. He loves over the top gifts, but that is not right and that is not wrong. That's just his personality. And whether it's like he picks me up through the drive-through a McDonald's Diet Coke, or he buys me an expensive gift, or he brings me on a vacation, the gratitude that I make sure to practice and to let him know is the exact same, because life will have ups and downs, and it's important for you to be grateful all of those moments, just like you appreciate your husband being grateful for the things that you do. You cannot do everything, for example, postpartum as you did when you were perhaps a housewife or just like a working woman and you lived in a one-bedroom apartment and you had less space to take care of. But imagine if your husband wasn't grateful for like you changing the baby's diaper or like having a little bit of energy to make a crock pot meal early postpartum, in comparison to that time where you didn't have any kids and you were living in a smaller space and you could just clean everything perfectly. Because you can't do that anymore and you're in a season where it's more difficult. Should your husband be less grateful? The answer is no. It feels good to be appreciated. So make sure that you are also appreciating your husband throughout all seasons. So I'm going to conclude there, because regular viewers know that there hits a point where my kids just can't sit around anymore. They need me to stop filming. I would love to hear your marriage advice down below. Again, liking the video. I know it might be a little bit annoying when I continue to say this, but it truly does help the video get pushed out into the algorithm to the right people who need it. And a big shout out to my members. I love you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.